I didn't know my life was about to split in two until I heard my sister laugh on a phone call she never meant me to hear. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind that pretends to be ordinary. I was sitting in my car outside the accounting firm where I'd worked since graduating college, hands still on the steering wheel, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. I had stayed late again, fixing a spreadsheet my manager said was urgent, the same word he always used when he wanted something done quietly and without complaint. I was about to drive home when my phone buzzed. A missed call from my mother, then another. I frowned. My mother never called twice unless something was wrong. I tapped voicemail. Instead of her voice, I heard my sister's. "Okay, but make sure she doesn't find out yet." My sister said, her tone light, almost playful. "I don't want drama before the wedding." There was a pause, then my mother laughed softly. "She won't," she said. "You know how she is. She always understands." My stomach dropped. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, heart pounding, listening as if my body had already decided this moment mattered more than anything else that day. My sister continued, "I mean, it's not like she needs to be there. This day is about me, and honestly, she'll just make things awkward." Another pause, then my mother again, voice calm, reassuring. "It's for the best. We'll tell her later, after everything's settled." The voicemail ended. For a long moment I didn't breathe. I replayed it, once, twice, a third time. Each word landed heavier than the last. She won't find out yet. After everything's settled. The wedding. I stared at my phone, the screen glowing faintly in the dimming afternoon. My reflection looked unfamiliar, like I was watching someone else process the betrayal for me. I was 29 years old. The older sister. The reliable one. The one who remembered birthdays, paid bills on time, showed up early, stayed late, and smoothed things over when my family pretended problems would fix themselves. And apparently I wasn't invited to my own sister's wedding. I drove home in silence, the radio off, the city blurring past my windows. I barely noticed the traffic, the stoplights, the familiar turns. My mind kept circling the same thought, sharp and relentless. How long had they been planning this without me? By the time I reached my apartment, the sky had darkened into that muted blue that comes just before night. I didn't turn on the lights. I dropped my purse by the door and stood there, shoes still on, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I opened my phone again. No message from my sister. No explanation. No invitation. Instead, there it was on social media. A photo of her standing in front of a white venue I recognized instantly. Long driveway, wrought iron gates, a place she had sent me links to months earlier asking for my opinion. Her caption read, "Counting down to forever." Our mother had commented underneath with a heart emoji and the words, "So proud of you, my girl." My name wasn't anywhere. I sank onto the couch and let the memory rush in uninvited. The first time my sister had called me about the wedding, she'd been crying. That shaky, helpless crying she'd perfected over the years. She said the venue needed a deposit immediately or they'd lose the date. She said her fiancé's finances were tied up. She said Mom was stressed. And I had done what I always did. I said I'll handle it. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. The folder was still there, labeled innocently wedding documents. Inside were contracts, receipts, confirmation emails, my name on every single one, my address, my signature. I scrolled until I saw the total amount I had transferred over the last few months. I felt my chest tighten as if my body was finally catching up to what my mind refused to accept. This wasn't just exclusion, it was erasure. My phone buzzed again, a text from my mother. "Don't overthink things, we'll talk soon, focus on your work." Focus on your work. The phrase burned. It was the same thing she'd said when my birthday was forgotten. When I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving dinner because my sister was hosting friends. When my promotion was brushed off because my sister was having a rough week. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city lights flickered on, one by one, people moving through their lives, unaware that mine had just shifted on its axis. For years, I'd told myself this was normal. Families weren't perfect. Someone had to be the strong one. Someone had to keep things together. But standing there looking at my reflection in the glass, I felt something else begin to surface. Anger, yes, hurt definitely. But beneath it, something quieter and far more dangerous. Clarity. I went back to my desk and reopened one of the contracts. I read it slowly this time, every line, every clause I'd skimmed over when I trusted them. And that's when I saw it. A sentence buried near the bottom, written in plain language, no legal drama. Primary account holder retains full authority to modify or terminate services prior to the event date. I read it again. Then a third time, my heart started to race not with fear but with possibility. They had decided I didn't belong at the celebration. They had decided I was inconvenient, expendable, invisible. But they had built the entire thing on my name. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my sister. "Hey," she said brightly when I answered as if nothing were wrong. "Did you see the venue post I tagged Mom in? It's gorgeous, right?" I closed my eyes, listening to the ease in her voice, the assumption that I would smile and play along like I always did. "Yeah," I said slowly, "it's beautiful." "I knew you'd agree," she replied. "You're so practical. Anyway, I've got to run. So much to do." She hung up without waiting for my response. I sat there in the quiet, my laptop screen still glowing with the contract open, my name printed clearly at the top. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to call my mother back. I didn't feel the need to explain myself to smooth things over to understand. They had already made their choice. Now it was my turn to make mine. And as I stared at that single line in the contract, a thought settled into place with terrifying calm. If they wanted a wedding without me, I could give them exactly that, the pattern I pretended not to see. That night I didn't sleep. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the city breathe through the cracked window. Every car that passed sounded louder than it should have, every siren like a reminder that the world was still moving, while I lay suspended between what I thought my family was and what it had always been. Sometime after midnight, I stopped trying to rest and reached for my laptop again. Not because I planned anything yet, not because I was ready to act, because I needed to understand. I opened a blank document and typed a single word at the top: history. Then I started scrolling through my email. At first, it was just the wedding receipts, venue confirmations, catering deposits, floral estimates, all under my name, all paid on time, all polite, professional, unquestioning. But then I went further back. A few years, 5, 8, and something unsettling began to form. There was the email from the mortgage company thanking me for covering a missed payment on my mother's house, the one I'd chalked up to a clerical error. Then the car insurance renewal sent directly to me, even though the car wasn't mine. A hospital billing statement from the year my mother had surgery addressed to me because it was easier that way. I copied dates and amounts into the document, line by line, quietly. It felt strange, almost disloyal to see it all laid out like that. But it also felt honest in a way my life never had before. I remembered the first time it happened. I was 23, fresh out of college, still living on takeout and optimism. My father had passed suddenly the year before, and my mother had been lost in grief. My sister was still in school, fragile and dramatic, the family's emotional center. Someone had to step up. So I did. I paid the utilities that month without asking questions, then the property taxes. Then the late fee on a credit card my mother forgot she'd used. Each time she'd smiled at me with gratitude that felt warm but fleeting. "You're so responsible," she'd say. "I don't know what we'd do without you." I believed her. Over time, the requests became expectations. The gratitude became assumption. By the time my sister moved to another state, chasing a career she never quite settled into, I was already the safety net, the one they called when something went wrong, the one who fixed things quietly so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. I scrolled through messages from my sister. "Hey, can you cover this just until next month? I swear I'll pay you back. You're the only one I trust with this stuff." The words felt different now. Less like affection, more like strategy. At 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. "Are you upset? You seemed quiet earlier." I stared at it for a long time. I could almost hear her voice, gentle but firm, already framing my silence as overreaction. I typed a response, then deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. Finally, I set the phone face down and went back to the document. History didn't lie, people did. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had changed. I smiled at coworkers, nodded in meetings, answered emails. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. During lunch, I checked social media again. My sister had posted another update. A short video this time, walking through the venue with her fiancé laughing as she pointed out where the ceremony would be. Our mother was in the background adjusting my sister's hair. The caption read, "Couldn't do this without my amazing support system." I watched it twice, then a third time. I felt a hollow ache where pride should have been. That afternoon, my manager stopped by my desk. "You're always so dependable," he said casually. "I'm glad I can count on you." The word hit harder than it should have. Dependable. I smiled politely, but my chest tightened. It was the same word my family used. The same word that meant someone else's needs would always come before mine. On the drive home, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront anyone yet. I wasn't going to ask questions that would be brushed aside or turned against me. I was going to observe. That evening, my sister called. "Hey," she said, breathless. "Quick question. Did you get the updated catering invoice?" They changed the menu slightly. "Yes," I said evenly. "Great," she replied. "Just go ahead and take care of it, okay? I'll owe you." There it was again, the casual assumption. "I'll look at it," I said. She hesitated for half a second, then laughed. "You always do. That's why I love you." Love. After we hung up, I opened the invoice. It was higher than the last one. Not by much, but enough to notice. I didn't pay it. Not yet. Instead, I clicked into the contract again. I read the clauses more carefully this time. I researched the vendor. I noted the cancellation windows, the penalties, the authority lines. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was learning the rules of the game I'd been playing blindly for years. The next few days confirmed what I already suspected. I wasn't included in group messages about planning. I found out details through posts or casual mentions. When I asked questions, I was told not to worry. When I offered opinions, they were brushed off. But when money was involved, suddenly everyone remembered me. My mother called one evening, her voice sweet. "Your sister is under so much stress," she said. "I'm so glad she has you. You're such a blessing to this family." I closed my eyes. A blessing. I wondered if blessings ever felt this heavy. After the call, I added another section to the document. Pattern. I wrote until my hands ached. Every moment I'd been sidelined. Every time I'd been told I was overreacting. Every occasion I wasn't invited to because it was simpler that way. By the time I finished, the document was several pages long. Not dramatic, not emotional, just factual. And the facts were undeniable. They didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as infrastructure. That realization hurt more than the wedding exclusion itself. Because it meant this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't stress, it wasn't oversight. It was design. Late that night, I saved the document under a new name. Leverage. I didn't know exactly how or when I would use it, but I knew one thing with certainty. I was done pretending this was normal. And as I shut down my laptop, a calm settled over me that felt unfamiliar but steady. They had spent years teaching me to carry weight without complaint. They had no idea what would happen now that I finally set it down. The invitation that never came. The invitation arrived on a Friday. Not in my mailbox. Not under my door. Not even digitally the way people do now when they want to seem inclusive without committing to anything real. I saw it on my cousin's kitchen counter. I had stopped by her place after work to drop off a jacket I'd borrowed months earlier. It was supposed to be quick, 5 minutes, in and out. But there it was. Thick cardstock, cream-colored, raised lettering. My sister's name and her fiancé's perfectly centered, elegant, and confident. I froze in the doorway. My cousin noticed my stare and followed my gaze. Her face shifted just slightly, that almost imperceptible tightening around the eyes. The look people get when they realize you're about to learn something you weren't meant to know. "Oh," she said softly, "you haven't." I shook my head before she could finish. "No." The silence that followed was heavy and awkward. She moved the invitation off the counter too late for it to matter. I thought. She started, then stopped. "I assumed you were already invited." So did I. I picked up the envelope, my fingers brushing the smooth paper. It felt expensive, intentional. My sister's handwriting wasn't on it. The addresses were printed. Formal, final. Inside was the full layout, ceremony time, reception details, dress code, everything spelled out with certainty. There was no mention of me. No +1 I could pretend was missing. No polite error, no oversight. I handed it back carefully as if it might shatter. My cousin swallowed. "I'm so sorry." "It's fine," I said automatically. The lie slid out of me with practiced ease. I left soon after, walking back to my car in a daze. The sun was low, throwing long shadows across the street. I sat behind the wheel and stared straight ahead, heart pounding. The image of that invitation burned into my mind. This was different from overhearing a voicemail. This was proof. They hadn't just talked about excluding me. They'd planned it, printed it, sent it out to everyone else. When I got home, my phone buzzed, a text from my sister. "Can you call me when you have a minute?" I laughed once, sharp and humorless, then called her back. She answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said brightly. Too brightly. "I was just thinking about you." I leaned against the kitchen counter, my apartment quiet around me. "Were you?" A pause, small but noticeable. "Listen," she said. "I heard you stopped by our cousin's place." There it was. "Yes," I said. Another pause, longer this time. I guess this is awkward, she said lightly. I wanted to tell you myself. I waited. She exhaled. We decided to keep the wedding really small, intimate, just immediate family and close friends. Immediate family. I closed my eyes, and I'm not immediate family. That's not what I mean, she said quickly. You know how sensitive you can be. We just didn't want tension. Tension. Because I paid for half of it, I said quietly. Silence. Not denial, not confusion, silence. That's not fair, she finally said. You offered to help. I straightened. I offered to help. I didn't offer to disappear. She sighed, the sound heavy with irritation. You're making this about money. This is about peace. Peace. The word tasted bitter. So when were you planning to tell me? Another pause. After the wedding, she admitted. We didn't want it to become a whole thing. I smiled to myself, though she couldn't see it, of course. She relaxed, mistaking my calm for acceptance. I knew you'd understand. You always do. That sentence landed like a verdict. We hung up shortly after. She told me she loved me. I didn't say it back. That night I sat at my desk and opened the folder again. Leverage. I added a new section. Exclusion. I documented everything. The voicemail, the invitation citing, the call, dates, times, exact phrasing. Not because I needed to convince anyone else, because I needed to stop gaslighting myself. The next week, the distance became obvious. Group messages I wasn't in. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room. My mother calling only to ask logistical questions, never emotional ones. One afternoon, she invited me to lunch. I just want us to be okay, she said, stirring her soup. This wedding has been stressful for everyone. For everyone, I repeated. She frowned. You know what I mean. No, I said calmly. I don't think I do. She looked surprised, almost offended. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Making everything so difficult. I met her gaze, you mean noticing. Her lips pressed together. You've always been so independent. We thought you'd be fine. Fine. That word had followed me my entire life. The assumption that because I didn't fall apart, I didn't feel pain. I paid the check and stood. I am fine, I said. I'm just not invisible anymore. That evening, another email arrived, a reminder from the venue about a final payment deadline. I stared at it for a long time. Then I forwarded it to myself and saved it. The pieces were aligning. They were moving forward as if nothing could disrupt their perfect timeline, as if the foundation beneath them wasn't mine. They had mistaken my silence for consent. They had mistaken my reliability for weakness. I closed my laptop and sat back, a strange calm settling over me again. I didn't feel vindictive. I didn't feel reckless. I felt prepared. The invitation never came, but something else did. Opportunity. The quiet rehearsal. The week after the invitation incident moved differently. Slower on the surface, heavier underneath. Every conversation felt staged, like I'd been written out of the script but still expected to hold up the scenery. I noticed it first at Sunday dinner. My mother had insisted we all get together, saying it would be good for morale. Her words. Not for healing, not for honesty. Morale. My sister arrived late, glowing in that way people do when attention has become oxygen. Her fiancé followed, polite and distant, the kind of man who never raised his voice and never truly committed to anything uncomfortable. They talked about table linens, seating charts, music choices. They talked around me. Every time I opened my mouth, the conversation subtly shifted like a river diverting around a stone. I watched, I listened, and I learned. At one point, my mother said we still need to confirm the rehearsal dinner. My sister waved a hand. That's already handled. I looked up. It is. She hesitated for half a second. Yeah, Rachel's got the details. All eyes turned to me. I smiled calmly. Do I? The table went quiet. My mother cleared her throat. You've always managed those things. Managed? I nodded slowly. I'll need the full plan then. My sister stiffened. Why? So I know what I'm responsible for, I said evenly. Her fiancé jumped in, smiling tightly. It's just logistics. Nothing to worry about. I met his eyes. Then it shouldn't be a problem to share it. Silence again. Later that night, my sister cornered me in the kitchen while our mother was distracted. You're being weird, she whispered sharply. I'm being precise, I replied. She scoffed. This is exactly why we didn't want tension. I leaned against the counter. You created the tension. I just stopped absorbing it. She stared at me, searching for the version of me that would apologize. When she didn't find it, her expression hardened. Just don't make a scene, she said. That was the first time I realized how little she understood what was happening. I wasn't rehearsing a scene. I was rehearsing absence. The next day, I took a personal day from work. I told no one. I didn't need excuses. I spent the morning calling vendors, not to cancel anything, not yet. Just to confirm. Hi, I said calmly. I'm calling to verify my status on the account. Each answer came back the same. Yes, you're listed as the primary contact. Yes, all authorizations go through you. Yes, any changes require your approval. I took notes, dates, names, policies. By noon, my notebook was full. By afternoon, my chest felt lighter than it had in years. This wasn't impulsive. This was structural. That evening, my mother called. Your sister says you've been distant, she said gently. I've been observant, I replied. She sighed. You're reading too much into things. No, I said, I'm reading exactly what's there. She didn't respond immediately. Then softer. You know she needs support right now. I closed my eyes, so do I. Another pause. Well, she said finally, this isn't about you. There it was. I felt something inside me settle into place. Not anger, acceptance. You're right, I said, it isn't. She seemed relieved. Good, I knew you'd come around. We hung up. That night, I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I named it simply Proof. I began saving everything. Screenshots, emails, voicemails, contracts, confirmations. Not because I planned to show anyone, because I was done trusting memory to protect me. 2 days later, the rehearsal dinner invitation went out. Not to me. I found out because my cousin texted. Hey, are you coming to the rehearsal on Thursday? I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. I wasn't invited. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Oh, I thought it was automatic. I smiled faintly. Automatic. That evening, my sister called again, her tone tight. I heard you told people you weren't invited. I told the truth, I said. She exhaled sharply. You're embarrassing me. I laughed softly. No, you're embarrassing yourself. She went quiet. Why are you doing this? She asked. I considered the question, truly considered it. Because for the first time I said I'm listening to what you've been saying all along. She didn't respond. The rehearsal dinner happened without me. Photos appeared online, toasts, laughter, our mother glowing with pride, my sister radiant. Someone commented, family is everything. I turned off my phone. That night I printed out the contracts, spread them across my dining table like a map. This wasn't revenge. It was alignment. I saw clearly now. They had written a story where I existed only as a utility, as a background figure whose role was to stabilize the frame while the stars took center stage. They had practiced excluding me, rehearsed it quietly, politely, confidently. They believed I would stay in my place. They were wrong. As I gathered the papers back into their folders, my phone buzzed with one last message from my sister. Everything's almost perfect, please don't ruin this. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I typed back a single sentence. I'm not ruining anything, I'm just stepping out of it. And for the first time since this all began, I slept the line they didn't know existed. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, my phone was quiet. Too quiet. No frantic calls, no passive-aggressive texts, no carefully worded messages disguised as concern. Just silence thick and deliberate like they'd all agreed to wait me out. That silence used to scare me. It felt like exile. Now it felt like permission. I made coffee and sat at my dining table, the contracts neatly stacked to my left, my laptop open to my right. Outside, the city moved as usual. Cars passed, a dog barked, someone laughed on the sidewalk below. The world hadn't ended just because my family had decided I was inconvenient. I opened my email. There it was. Final confirmation request from the venue. Subject line, cheerful, professional, confident. They were waiting for my approval to release the remaining payments and lock in services. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I opened my banking app. I scrolled through the transactions slowly, deliberately. Each charge told a story I'd refused to read for years. Not just wedding expenses, utilities for my mother's house, emergency transfers to my sister. Credit card balances mysteriously shifted onto my account. It wasn't generosity. It was dependency disguised as love. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister's fiancé. Hey, just checking in. Everything okay? I stared at the message, noticing how carefully neutral it was. No warmth, no acknowledgement, just a temperature check. I typed back. Everything is exactly as it should be. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. He didn't respond. At 10:30, my mother called. I let it ring twice before answering. Good morning, she said too brightly. Did you get the email from the venue? Yes, I replied. And you'll take care of it, she asked. I leaned back in my chair. What do you mean by take care of it? A pause. You know what I mean. No, I said calmly. I want you to say it. She exhaled, impatience creeping into her voice. Approve the final payments, confirm everything. I nodded to myself. Why? Silence. Because it's your sister's wedding, she said like that settled it. And I'm not invited, I replied. That's not the point, she snapped, irritation breaking through. I smiled faintly. It's the entire point. Her tone shifted softer now. Strategic. Rachel, don't do this. People are counting on you. People. Not family, not me. People. I've noticed, I said. She sighed. You've always been so strong. Why are you choosing now to make things difficult? There it was again. The story she'd told herself for years. That my strength existed for their convenience. I'm not making things difficult, I said evenly. I'm making them accurate. She hung up without another word. At noon, my sister finally called. She didn't bother pretending this time. What are you doing? She demanded the moment I answered. I'm working, I said. On what? Untangling my life from yours. She laughed sharply. You're being dramatic. I glanced at the contracts. I'm being contractual. That stopped her. You wouldn't, she said after a beat. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. Wouldn't what? Don't play games, she snapped. You know what this means to me. I know what it costs me, I replied. Her voice softened just slightly. You said you'd help. I did, I said. I didn't say I'd disappear. She was quiet now. I could almost hear her recalibrating, searching for the version of me that would cave. You're really going to punish me, she said. I closed my eyes. I'm not punishing you. I'm correcting an imbalance. She scoffed. That's just a fancy way of saying revenge. No, I said. Revenge is loud. This is quiet. She hung up. I stared at my phone for a long moment, then set it face down. My hands were steady, my breathing calm. I didn't feel cruel. I felt resolved. At 2 p.m, I opened the venue email. I read it carefully, then I clicked reply. Hello, I am reviewing the account details as the primary holder. Please place all services on temporary hold pending confirmation. Do not release additional payments without my direct authorization. I read it twice, then sent it. The reply came less than 10 minutes later. Of course. The account has been placed on hold until further notice. Please reach out when you are ready to proceed. I sat back in my chair and let the moment settle. Nothing exploded. No alarms. No dramatic confrontation. Just a quiet shift. Like turning off a light in a room no one realized depended on a single switch. My phone lit up almost immediately. Missed calls, texts, voicemails stacking on top of each other. I didn't listen. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote a new heading. Boundary. Then another. Consequence. They had crossed a line long before the wedding. They just never knew where it was because I never enforced it. Now they would learn. That evening I went for a walk. The air was cool, the sky streaked with fading light. Couples passed me on the sidewalk laughing arms linked. A woman my mother's age walked her dog smiling politely as we crossed paths. Life went on. When I returned home, there were 7 voicemails waiting. I listened to none of them. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the window watching the city glow. For years, I had confused love with endurance, loyalty with self-erasure, strength with silence. Now I understood something they never had. When you stop holding everything together, the truth doesn't just crack. It collapses. And the line they didn't know existed had already been crossed. When the music stopped, the morning after I placed the venue on hold, I woke to chaos I didn't need to witness to understand. My phone was vibrating on the nightstand, the sound sharp and insistent like an alarm that had no snooze button. I let it buzz while I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and took a slow breath. For the first time in weeks, I felt rested. That alone told me everything. I checked the screen. 12 missed calls, all from family. A few from unknown numbers. Vendors, most likely. I set the phone down and went to the kitchen. I made coffee, toasted bread, did everything at an unhurried pace that would have driven my mother insane. Silence, I had learned, was not empty, it was intentional. By the time I sat at the table, my phone buzzed again. A text from my sister's fiancé. Please call me, this is urgent. Urgent had been their favorite word when they needed something. I took a sip of coffee before replying. I'm unavailable this morning. Please email. The reply came almost instantly. We're having issues with the venue. They're saying the account is on hold. I stared at the message, then typed back. That's correct. 3 dots appeared, stayed, disappeared. Another message. Why? I leaned back in my chair considering. Because I'm the account holder. No response. At 9:15, my sister called again. This time I answered. What did you do? She demanded, skipping any pretense of greeting. I paused the account, I said calmly. You can't just do that, she snapped. I can, I replied. And I did. Her breathing was shallow now. This is insane. The wedding is in days. Yes, I said, I'm aware. You're sabotaging me, she said, her voice rising. I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, then brought it back. No, I'm opting out. She laughed sharp and disbelieving. You're enjoying this. I thought about it. About the quiet in my apartment. The way my shoulders no longer ached from carrying weight that wasn't mine. No, I said honestly. I'm enjoying not being used. She went silent. Then my mother's voice cut in suddenly on the line. She must have been listening on speaker. Rachel, she said, slow and deliberate, you need to fix this, now. I closed my eyes. Fix what? You're humiliating us, she said. People are asking questions. Good, I replied. Her gasp was audible. How can you be so cold? I smiled faintly. Cold doesn't crack under pressure. There was shouting in the background now. My sister crying, someone pacing, the sound of a family unraveling without its scaffolding. This is about a misunderstanding, my mother said, trying again. We can talk this through. You already did, I said quietly, without me. The line went dead. I set the phone down and stared at the wall for a long moment. My heart was steady. My hands didn't shake. The music had stopped. And suddenly everyone noticed who'd been paying for the band. An hour later, my email inbox filled with polite professional messages. We have paused your order pending authorization. Please advise on next steps. Your confirmation is required to proceed. Each message was a reminder of something I'd never truly acknowledged. I had power. Not because I wanted it. Not because I craved control. Because I had been responsible while others were comfortable letting me be. At 11, my cousin texted, "What is going on at the venue?" "People are panicking," I replied simply. I stepped back. She sent a single response. "About time." That afternoon, I received a voicemail from the wedding planner. Her voice was tight rehearsed. "Hi, Rachel. This is just to confirm your intent regarding the services. We need your authorization to proceed." I didn't call back. Instead, I opened my laptop and reviewed the timeline. Cancellation windows, refund policies, liability clauses. Everything I'd once skimmed over in good faith. They had assumed I would never read the fine print. They had assumed wrong. By early evening, the social media posts changed tone. No more glowing updates, no behind-the-scenes laughter, just silence. I imagined my sister pacing, refreshing her phone, waiting for someone else to fix what she refused to face. That used to be my role. Not anymore. My mother called again at 6. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Rachel, please, this has gone too far." Too far for whom? I deleted it. Later, I went out to dinner alone. A small place down the street. The waiter asked if I was celebrating anything. I thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes," I said. "Freedom." He smiled, not knowing how accurate that was. When I got home, my phone had finally gone quiet. They were regrouping, rewriting their narrative, searching for leverage of their own. But it was too late. They had built their perfect day on the assumption that I would always show up, always pay, always disappear when asked. Now the music was gone, and all that was left was the sound of truth, echoing through the empty room they called family, the scramble. The silence didn't last. It never does when people realize the safety net has been pulled away. By the next morning, the tone changed. Panic has a sound, and I could hear it even through text messages and missed calls. It's sharper than anger, thinner than rage. It sounds like breath taken too quickly and thoughts tripping over each other. I woke early without an alarm. Sunlight cut across my bedroom wall, bright and unapologetic. I lay there for a moment, listening to my own breathing, steady and calm. Somewhere across town, my sister was unraveling. I didn't feel joy about that. I felt distance. And distance, I was learning, was mercy. My phone lit up again. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then another. Then another. When I finally checked voicemail, the first one was from the venue manager. "Rachel, we need to hear from you today. There are guests arriving, vendors asking questions. Without confirmation, we can't proceed." Professional, controlled, but underneath it, urgency. The next voicemail was not controlled at all. It was my sister, crying. Not the delicate performative crying she used to get her way. This was raw, ugly, desperate. "You did this on purpose," she sobbed. "You waited until the last minute. Everyone's watching. You ruined everything." I didn't flinch. I had spent years absorbing her emotions like a sponge, wringing myself out afterward in private. Now I let her words fall where they landed, not on me. At 10 in the morning, my mother showed up at my apartment. I knew it was her before I opened the door. No one else knocked like that. Sharp, repetitive, entitled. When I opened it, she stood there, rigid eyes, wild purse clutched to her chest like a shield. "You need to fix this," she said before I could speak. I stepped aside and let her in. Not out of obedience, out of control. She paced my living room like a trapped animal. Do you have any idea what you've done? The florist won't release the arrangements. The band is threatening to walk. The caterer says the card was declined. I folded my arms. I didn't decline anything. I paused authorization. She spun on me. You're playing with words. No, I said evenly. I'm using them. Her voice cracked. This is your sister's wedding. And I'm her sister, I replied. Or does that only matter when you need something? She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. In a way, she didn't. You're being vindictive, she said finally. I shook my head. I'm being accurate. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her tactics were failing her one by one. Guilt didn't land. Authority didn't stick. Fear had nowhere to root. What do you want? She asked at last. There it was. The real question. I want my name removed from every contract, I said calmly. I want written confirmation that I'm not financially responsible for any of this. And I want acknowledgement that you excluded me intentionally. Her eyes widened. That's ridiculous. Then you should have no problem agreeing to it, I said. She sat down hard on the couch, suddenly exhausted. You're tearing this family apart. I met her gaze. No, I stopped holding it together. She looked away. Within the hour, my sister's fiancé called. His voice was clipped, professional, strained. We can transfer the accounts, he said, but it will take time. You had time, I replied. You just didn't think you'd need it. He exhaled slowly. Rachel, be reasonable. I almost laughed. Reasonable. I have been reasonable my entire life, I said. This is what happens when I stop. By mid-afternoon, the cracks were visible to everyone. Guests arriving early posted confused messages. Vendors hovered waiting for confirmation. The planner sent frantic emails marked urgent. I watched it all unfold from a distance, not from cruelty, from clarity. This was the scramble. The moment when people who've relied on your silence realize they never learned how to stand on their own. My sister called again, calmer now, voice low and controlled. What do you want me to say? She asked. I closed my eyes. Say the truth. A long pause. You're not coming because I didn't want you there, she said finally. I thought you'd make things complicated. I opened my eyes. Thank you. That's it, she snapped. That's all you needed. No, I said softly. That's all I needed to hear. I forwarded the call log, the contracts, and the documentation to a separate folder labeled Closure. By evening, my phone went quiet again. They were scrambling, reshuffling, negotiating with vendors who suddenly knew the truth, that the reliable sister was no longer underwriting their fantasy. I sat on my balcony as the sun dipped below the buildings, the city glowing amber and calm. Somewhere a wedding was coming undone. Not because I attacked it, but because I stepped away from the role that made it possible. And as the light faded, I realized something that surprised even me. I wasn't waiting for revenge anymore. I was watching accountability arrive. The wedding day arrived without ceremony in my apartment. No alarms, no rushing, no carefully chosen dress hanging on the door. Just quiet morning light spilling across the hardwood floor and the distant sound of traffic waking up like it did every other day. I woke before my phone. That felt important. For years, my life had been dictated by other people's schedules, other people's emergencies. I'd trained myself to react before I even knew what I was reacting to. This morning, there was none of that. Just breath. Just stillness. I made coffee and stood by the window watching the city stretch awake. Somewhere an hour South hair was being curled, vows rehearsed, champagne poured. Somewhere else, panic was already crawling up throats. My phone buzzed for the first time at 8:15. Mom, I didn't answer. Then my sister. Then the wedding planner. Then a number I didn't recognize. I let them all ring. At 9, curiosity nudged me. Not anxiety, curiosity. I picked up my phone and scrolled. Social media was already filling with posts. The venue's gates, the flowers, the arch. Carefully framed images designed to project perfection. But perfection has seams, and once you know where to look, you can see them everywhere. A story posted by a guest showed the band setting up late. Another showed staff whispering in tight circles. One caption read, running behind, but it'll be worth it. I smiled faintly. At 10:30, my cousin texted, "It's chaos." I typed back, "I'm sorry you're caught in it." She replied a moment later, "I'm not sorry anymore. People are finally seeing it." At 11, the calls escalated. Missed call after missed call stacking on top of each other until the screen felt crowded. I didn't clear them. I wanted the record. At 11:45, my sister left a voicemail. Her voice was tight, controlled, brittle at the edges. "This has gone far enough," she said. "You made your point. Answer your phone." I listened to it once. Then I saved it. No apology, no accountability, just demand. At noon, the caterer posted an update. Not public, private message. Hi, Rachel. We're unable to proceed without payment confirmation. Please advise. I stared at the message for a long moment, then I replied. As previously stated, I am no longer authorizing charges related to this event. Please direct all future communication to the bride and groom. The response came back quickly. Understood. Thank you for the clarification. That thank you landed harder than it should have. For years, I'd been invisible labor. Today, I was visible authority. At 12:30, my mother showed up again. I watched her from the window as she stood outside my building phone pressed to her ear, pacing. I didn't open the door. She left after 15 minutes. I didn't feel guilty. I felt finished. At 1, my sister finally broke. She sent a message, not a call, a message. I never thought you'd do this to me. I read it twice, slowly. Then I typed, I never thought you'd erase me. There was no response. At 1:30, the first guest left the venue. I knew because someone posted a story from the parking lot. The caption read, "Well, that was awkward." I set my phone down and went for a walk. The park near my apartment was full of life. Children running, couples arguing softly, an older woman sitting alone on a bench feeding birds with practiced patience. I sat on a bench across from her and watched the pigeons gather. She glanced at me and smiled. "Big day," she said, nodding at my dress, which was simple, comfortable, unremarkable. "Not for me," I replied. She laughed softly. "Those are the best kinds." I stayed there longer than I meant to, letting the world exist without needing anything from me. When I returned home, my phone had exploded. Messages from extended family, confusion, speculation, some subtle accusations, some quiet support. One message stood out, from my aunt. "I didn't know, I'm so sorry." I stared at it for a long time, then replied, "Thank you for saying that." At 3, the truth started to surface publicly. A guest posted a video of the band packing up. Another showed empty tables where food should have been. Someone else posted my sister yelling at the planner, her voice sharp and unfiltered. The comments were brutal. "What's going on? Did something happen? This feels off." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt vindicated. There's a difference. Triumph is loud. Vindication is quiet. It doesn't gloat. It simply stands still and lets the truth catch up. At 4, my sister called again. This time I answered. Her voice cracked the second she spoke. "Are you happy now?" I closed my eyes. "No." Silence. "I'm relieved," I continued. "There's a difference." "You ruined my wedding," she whispered. "No," I said calmly. "I ruined the lie it was built on." She started crying then. Real crying. The kind that doesn't ask for anything because it knows it won't get it. "I needed you," she said. I leaned against the counter. "You needed my money. You didn't want me." She didn't argue. That told me everything. We hung up without saying goodbye. At 6, the venue officially suspended services. A polite email arrived confirming it. No emotion, no judgment, just fact. I printed it and added it to the folder. Closure. As the sun set, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. The city glowed gold and pink and blue, indifferent to family drama and broken illusions. Somewhere my sister was sitting in a half-lit room in a wedding dress that had lost its meaning. Somewhere my mother was rewriting history in her head. Somewhere people were choosing sides. And here I was, uninvited, unburdened, unafraid. The day passed without me. And for the first time in my life, everything felt exactly as it should. The morning after the wedding that never happened, the world didn't look scorched or broken. It looked ordinary. That was the strangest part. I woke to sunlight slipping through the blinds, the sound of a delivery truck backing up somewhere down the street. My body felt loose, almost light, as if it had finally stopped bracing for impact. For years, mornings had started with a quiet inventory of obligations. Who needed me? What needed fixing? What emotional mess would land on my shoulders before noon? This morning there was none of that. I made coffee and sat at the table, my phone face down beside the mug. I didn't touch it at first. I wanted to feel the quiet before the noise tried to reclaim me. Eventually curiosity won. The screen lit up with notifications, stacked like a backlog of confession. Missed calls, texts, messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Family members who had never questioned why I paid for things suddenly wanted clarity. The narrative was unraveling. I scrolled slowly. My aunt. "I had no idea you were paying for everything." A cousin. "People are saying the venue shut everything down." "Is that true, an old family friend?" "Your mother is devastated." There it was. The pivot. Sympathy not for me, but for the woman who had spent decades teaching me to disappear. I didn't reply to most of them, not because I was angry, because I was done explaining myself to people who only noticed me when the system failed. At 10 in the morning, my sister sent a message. "You humiliated me, everyone knows." I stared at it for a long time. The words felt small now, desperate. I typed back one sentence. "Everyone finally knows the truth." She didn't respond. An hour later, a group chat lit up. Someone had added me without asking. Extended family. Names I recognized. Some I barely did. What really happened? This is tearing the family apart. We should talk like adults. I exited the chat without replying. That was my answer. Around noon, I received an email from the wedding planner. Polite, professional, apologetic. She confirmed that all services had been formally suspended due to lack of authorized payment and requested confirmation that I was no longer affiliated with the event. I replied with a simple yes. Seeing it in writing felt final, in a way nothing else had. The role I'd played for years had officially ended. Not with a fight, with a signature. In the afternoon, my mother finally called again. I answered. She didn't start with anger this time, she started with exhaustion. "I don't understand how it came to this," she said. I leaned against the counter, staring out the window. "I do. You could have handled this differently," she said quietly. I nodded. "So could you." Silence stretched between us. People often imagine confrontation as shouting doors, slamming accusations flying, but the real turning points are quieter. They sound like two people finally hearing the truth and realizing there's no version of it that makes them comfortable. "I did my best," she said at last. "I know," I replied. "It just wasn't enough." She inhaled sharply. "You've hurt your sister deeply." I closed my eyes. She hurt me first. Another silence. Then softer families forgive. "Yes," I said. "When there's accountability." She didn't respond. We ended the call without resolution, without apology, without promises. And for the first time, that felt acceptable. That evening, a local news blog posted a short piece. Nothing dramatic, just facts. A high-profile wedding disrupted due to financial disputes. An unnamed family member listed as primary account holder who withdrew authorization after being excluded. The comments were merciless. "You can't treat people like wallets." There's always more to the story. Good for whoever stood up for themselves. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. The truth had weight now. It didn't require my voice to carry it. Late that night, my sister sent one final message. "I never meant to hurt you, I just didn't want complications." I read it twice. Then I replied. "I was never a complication. I was inconvenient to your image." She didn't respond. I set my phone down and walked into my bedroom. I opened the closet and looked at the clothes I hadn't worn because there was never an occasion meant for me. Dresses bought for weddings I didn't attend. Shoes worn once, then tucked away. I took one dress down and laid it across the bed. Simple, elegant, unremarkable. I didn't put it on. Instead, I folded it and placed it in a donation bag. That felt right. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. The storm passed quickly once it realized there was nothing left to destroy. My sister disappeared from social media. My mother stopped calling. The family chat stayed silent. But something else happened too. People reached out, quietly, privately. A cousin who admitted she'd always wondered why I carried so much. An aunt who apologized for never asking questions. A friend who said, "I wish I'd had your courage years ago." I listened. I thanked them. I didn't step back into the role of fixer. I was learning a new posture, upright, unavailable, whole. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights blink on, I realized something I hadn't expected. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns fast. It consumes and then it's gone. What replaced it was steadier. A sense of self I hadn't been allowed to occupy before. They would tell their version of the story. Of course they would. Families always do. They'd say I overreacted. That money changed me. That I ruined something sacred. Let them. I finally understood that being misunderstood was a small price to pay for being free. The aftermath wasn't loud. It was quiet. And in that quiet, I began to hear myself again. 2 weeks passed before I heard my grandmother's name spoken out loud. Not in a phone call, not in a text, in a letter. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped through my mail slot like it had been waiting for the noise to die down. Thick envelope, cream paper, a return address I hadn't seen in years. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it, my thumb tracing the edge like I was afraid the truth might cut. My grandmother had always been the quiet one. My mother's mother. Sharp-eyed, soft-spoken. The kind of woman who noticed everything and commented on almost nothing. When I was little, she used to tell me, "Watch who benefits when you stay quiet." At the time, I thought it was just one of her strange sayings. The letter was brief, handwritten. "Rachel, I think it's time we talk. Please come see me when you can." No signature. She never signed her letters. I sat down slowly, my pulse steady but alert. In my family, silence was never accidental. Neither was timing. I drove to her house that afternoon. The same modest place she'd lived in for decades, tucked away on a quiet street where nothing flashy ever happened. She opened the door before I knocked. "You look thinner," she said, studying my face. "I feel lighter," I replied. That made her smile. We sat at her kitchen table, the same one where she'd taught me to shell peas and drink tea without sugar. She poured slowly, deliberately. No rush. I watched everything she said, finally. "I didn't ask how. I didn't need to. You paid for that wedding," she continued, "and they left you out." "Yes," I said. She nodded once. "I wondered how long it would take." "For what?" "For you to stop letting them spend your life." I swallowed. "You knew." "I suspected," she said. "Your mother has always had a talent for rearranging reality. Your sister learned early that tears were currency, and she looked at me steadily, learned that love meant service." I felt something in my chest loosen, not pain, recognition. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. Old, worn. My name was written on the tab. "I was going to wait," she said. "But after what happened, waiting feels dishonest." She slid the folder toward me. Inside were documents, legal, formal, dated years ago. My breath caught as I read the heading. "Trust agreement. I set it up after your father died," she said quietly. "He and I talked about you often. He worried." I looked up. "About me." "About how much you give," she replied, "and how little you're allowed to keep." The trust wasn't massive, not dramatic, but it was enough. Enough to be independence, enough to be choice. "You're the sole beneficiary," she said. "Your mother doesn't know. Your sister never will." I stared at the pages, my hands trembling slightly. "Why me?" She tilted her head. "Because you never asked. Because you carried everyone else. And because someone needed to make sure you'd have something that couldn't be taken." I closed the folder carefully. "They'll be furious," I said. She smiled faintly. "They already are." On the drive home, the world looked different, not brighter, clearer. That night, my mother called. "Did you see your grandmother today?" she asked too casually. "Yes," I said. A pause. She didn't say anything unusual. "No," I replied. She said exactly what she meant. My mother inhaled sharply. "You're poisoning her against us." I almost laughed. "I'm not that powerful." She hung up. A week later, the truth surfaced anyway. Not about the trust, about something else. A letter from a lawyer arrived. Formal, polite, addressed to me as a witness. It concerned my grandmother's will. I wasn't just a beneficiary, I was the executor. I sat very still as the realization settled. My grandmother hadn't just given me resources, she'd given me authority. The irony wasn't lost on me. My sister called the next day, her voice sharp. "Why didn't anyone tell me Grandma was changing things?" "She didn't change anything," I said, she clarified. "You're manipulating her," she accused. I shook my head. "She's been watching longer than either of us." That night I went through my old journals, pages filled with lists of things I'd done for others. Very few about what I wanted. I tore several pages out and fed them to the trash. The inheritance wasn't about money. It was about permission. Permission to stop proving my worth through sacrifice. Permission to let consequences land where they belonged. Permission to live a life that didn't require constant justification. I slept deeply that night. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a responsibility. It felt like a choice. Tiếp chương 11. Chapter 11. The confrontation they delayed. The confrontation didn't happen the way people imagined them. There was no dramatic showdown. No shouting match in a crowded room. No moment where everyone suddenly understood and apologized. It happened quietly on a Sunday afternoon when my mother realized she had run out of options. She showed up at my apartment without calling. I knew it was her the moment I heard the knock. Not impatient this time. Hesitant. Careful. When I opened the door, she looked older than I remembered. Not frail, just stripped of certainty. The confidence she'd worn like armor for decades had cracks in it now. "May I come in?" she asked. She hadn't asked me that in years. I stepped aside. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded tightly in her lap. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. "I hear you've been speaking to your grandmother," she said finally. Yes. Another pause. She's upset, my mother said. I met her gaze. So am I. Her lips pressed together. You've made things very difficult for this family. I nodded slowly. I stopped making them easy. She sighed, a sound heavy with frustration. You always do this. You hold things in until you explode. I shook my head. No, I held things in while you benefited. Then I stopped. That landed. I could see it in her eyes. She leaned forward. You embarrassed us. People are talking. Your sister hasn't left the house. I didn't respond right away. I waited until the urge to apologize passed. Do you know what people used to say about me? I asked calmly. She frowned. What? That I was reliable, practical, easygoing, that I never caused trouble. Her jaw tightened. I thought those were compliments, I continued. Now I know they were instructions. She stood abruptly. You're twisting everything. No, I said softly, I'm untwisting it. Her voice rose. Families sacrifice for each other. Yes, I agreed. But sacrifice isn't one person bleeding quietly while everyone else celebrates. She stared at me, breathing hard. For a moment, I thought she might cry. Instead, she straightened her shoulders. So what is it you want? She asked again. Like this was a negotiation. I considered her question carefully. I want you to stop telling people I ruined anything I said. I want you to stop rewriting what happened. And I want you to accept that I'm not coming back into the role you built for me. Her laugh was brittle. You think you can just walk away from your family? I already have, I replied. The room went very still. She looked around my apartment at the quiet, the order, the absence of chaos. Something in her expression shifted. Not guilt. Recognition. You're just like your father, she said quietly. I felt the words hit somewhere deep, but they didn't wound me. I know, I said, that's how I survived. She left shortly after that. No apology, no blessing. Just a final look over her shoulder, like she was trying to memorize a version of me she no longer understood. The next confrontation came unexpectedly. My sister called 3 days later. Not angry, not crying, flat. Grandma told me you're the executor, she said. Yes, that's not fair. I smiled faintly, neither was erasing me. She exhaled sharply. You planned this? No, I said, I endured it. Silence. Then quieter, you always make yourself the victim. I closed my eyes. I was the victim. I just stopped pretending I wasn't. Her voice cracked. You think you're better than us now? I answered honestly. No, I think I'm done being smaller. She didn't have a response for that. After the call, I sat alone for a long time. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. And underneath that something steady and real. Boundaries are exhausting at first. They require energy, attention, repetition, but eventually they begin to hold themselves. The family gatherings stopped. The invitations dried up. The background noise of obligation faded. In its place, something unfamiliar grew. Space. I filled it slowly. I took a class I'd always postponed. I spent Sundays reading instead of mediating arguments. I let calls go unanswered without rehearsing explanations in my head. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror and realized I didn't look guarded anymore. My shoulders were lower, my jaw unclenched. The world hadn't punished me for choosing myself. That was the biggest lie I'd believed. A week later, my grandmother called. I heard your mother came by, she said. Yes. And? I smiled, I didn't fold. She hummed approvingly. Good, you're learning. What if they never forgive me? I asked quietly. She didn't hesitate. Then they never deserved you. I sat with that for a long time after the call ended. Forgiveness, I realized, had never been the goal. Peace was. And peace doesn't ask permission. As I went to bed that night, I thought about everything that had led here. The wedding, the silence, the scramble, the inheritance, the confrontations that came too late. They thought the worst thing I could do was walk away. They were wrong. The worst thing for them was that I walked away without needing anything from them anymore. The first holiday after everything felt unreal. No group text, no forced smiles, no careful choreography around who would speak to whom. Just a quiet morning, soft light through my kitchen window, coffee steaming in my favorite mug. I had expected grief, or guilt, or at least a sharp ache where family used to live. Instead, there was calm. That calm startled me more than the chaos ever had. I spent the morning walking through my neighborhood, watching other people prepare for their celebrations. Cars packed with gifts, children tugging on scarves, couples arguing gently over forgotten items. Life unedited. For years I had watched families like that with envy, telling myself mine was just different. Not worse, just complicated. Now I understood something I'd avoided admitting. Different had been the story. Unfair had been the truth. In the afternoon, I visited my grandmother. She sat in her armchair, a blanket over her knees, sunlight warming her hands. "You look settled," she said, studying me the way she always had, like she was reading between sentences I never spoke aloud. "I feel settled," I replied. She nodded once. "That comes from alignment, when your life finally matches your values." We talked about small things, the weather, a neighbor's new dog, a book she was reading, no family gossip, no updates, no strategy. Before I left, she reached for my hand. Her grip was firm despite her age. "You didn't lose your family," she said quietly. "You lost your assignment." I drove home with those words echoing in my chest. That night I sat at my desk and opened a blank notebook. Not a budget, not a list of obligations, a blank page. At the top I wrote a question I'd never allowed myself to ask before. What do I want my life to feel like? Not look like, not justify, not explain. Feel like. The answers came slowly at first, then faster. Unrushed mornings, honest relationships, money that supports my life, not someone else's image. Love that doesn't require self-erasure. I realized then that revenge had never been my destination. Restoration was. The months that followed were quieter than any chapter of my life before them. I changed jobs. Not dramatically, just intentionally. I moved into a smaller apartment with more light. I spent weekends alone without apologizing for it. My sister never reached out again. My mother sent one short message months later. A holiday greeting. Polite, distant. I replied the same way. Cordial. Closed. There was no reconciliation. And to my surprise, I didn't miss it. Because reconciliation without accountability is just surrender in better packaging. One evening, I ran into an old friend who had heard what happened. She looked at me carefully before asking, "Was it worth it?" I thought about the wedding dress that never walked down the aisle, the lies that collapsed under their own weight, the inheritance that gave me choices instead of chains. The peace I woke up with now. "Yes," I said, "every part of it." She nodded slowly. "You're brave." I shook my head. I was exhausted. And that was the truth. Exhaustion can be a doorway if you stop fighting it. The last time I thought about the wedding was when I donated the folder labeled closure. I watched the papers slide into the bin, the weight of them leaving my hands. I didn't need proof anymore. I had my life back. Sometimes late at night, I think about the version of me who overheard that voicemail in her car. The one who still believed love meant endurance, who thought being excluded was a mistake instead of a message. I wish I could tell her this. One day you will stop begging to be included and start choosing where you belong. One day silence will feel like freedom, not rejection. One day you will realize that walking away isn't failure, it's discernment. If you're listening to this and you've ever been the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who carries everyone else while slowly disappearing, hear me. You are not selfish for wanting fairness. You are not cruel for enforcing boundaries. And you are not wrong for choosing peace over people who only love you when you're useful. The wedding that excluded me didn't end my family. It ended the lie that I needed their approval to exist. And that was the beginning of everything real. If this story resonated with you, if you've lived some version of it in your own life, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Your voice matters more than you've been told. And if you're ready for more stories about justice, karma, and finding your way back to yourself, stay here. Subscribe. You're not alone.